You know when you're a child and you just can't wait to grow up, but then when you do grow up and become an adult, you sometimes wish you could go back to being a child again? That's how I feel about medical school, even though whilst I was at medical school, it felt like such a long journey, but actually on reflection, the time went by so quickly. I really miss my time at medical school and sometimes I wish I could go back. However, if I did go back, there are definitely some things I would do differently to have an even better experience. There are some things that I do regret about my time at medical school, and I'm going to share those with you so that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Hi everyone, my name's Hiba and I graduated from medical school from the University of Manchester just a few months ago. So I'm going to start off strong with probably one of my biggest regrets, and that is not doing an international elective at medical school. For anyone who doesn't know, an elective is a 4 to 6 week block in usually your later years of medical school, where you can arrange to do a placement in a hospital anywhere in the world. The vast majority of people take this opportunity to go abroad and explore a new country, go sightseeing, all whilst also learning about the healthcare system in another country. So it really is such a unique and valuable opportunity that medical students have. I sadly didn't do an international elective and I really wish that I had. At Manchester, our elective was in our 4th year of medical school, which for me fell about a year or so after the last lockdown, which meant that although we could go on our elective, we were restricted in the number of countries we could go to. And the country that I wanted to do my elective in was on the list of restricted countries. This meant that the plans that I initially had fell through and I wasn't able to arrange anything else quick enough to actually go on an international elective. So I just ended up staying locally in Manchester. I really regret this. I feel like I could have probably tried a bit harder, but in my 4th year I was also very burnt out because our 4th year is really intense at Manchester. So yeah, I ended up missing the opportunity to travel and be a medical student in another country. So my advice to anyone watching this video is please do try to go on an international elective. There's often some sort of funding you can find as well to help finance it. So if you can, please do take the opportunity to travel, gain experience and make some memories. My next regret is also high up there, and that is not doing the European Studies program at Manchester / not learning a language whilst at medical school. So at the University of Manchester, they offer medical students something known as the European Studies program, which is when from your 1st year of medical school, you start learning a language, either German, French or Spanish. And then in your very final year of medical school, you spend a placement abroad in the corresponding country, so either France, Germany or Spain. This is something I really wanted to do for German. I studied German for 5 years at high school and then I also did it at AS level. And this program was one of the biggest reasons that I factored in for choosing Manchester. So to add you onto the course, they require an additional interview after you've already joined the program as a medical student, and that is just to ask you a few questions to understand your existing language skills and whether or not you know enough to begin the course. And unfortunately I didn't make it to the interview because I chickened out last minute. The day before I was due to have my interview, I was speaking to another medical student who was also in my year, who was also joining the European Studies program, and she was just talking about how she's very fluent in German, how she spent several years in Germany. And after I spoke to her, I remember feeling really anxious and feeling like I didn't know enough to be going to this interview or to deserve a place on the European Studies program, which in retrospect now, I probably did know enough to start the program because the whole point is that you learn along the way as well. But for that reason, I didn't end up going to the interview and I withdrew my application. So that is something quite unique that the University of Manchester offered, but something not as unique and something lots of universities across the country offer is that if you're an existing student at the university, it doesn't have to be a medical student. If you are taking any course at the university, they will offer you part-time language classes alongside it for a discounted tuition fee. So after I didn't make it onto the European Studies program, this is something that I looked at as another option in my 2nd year and then again in my 3rd year. But I always stayed on the fence about it because I was always worried about the workload being too much. I regret not going ahead and just enrolling onto the class because nothing good comes without any effort. So yes, it would have been a little bit more work, but by this time my German would have been so much better. I would have had some qualifications in German by now, and just overall I wouldn't be as rusty as I am in the language now. So my advice is, if you're like me and you're interested in learning languages or just doing something a little bit extra, try and figure out what is on offer at your university and consider enrolling yourself onto some additional classes. Next, I feel like Every medical student slash doctor says this, but genuinely, I wish I didn't worry so much about my exams. I used to get so stressed out for my exams to the point where I would have hair falling out in the lead up to exams. I would have an upset stomach. It was just really, really unhealthy. Before any exam, whether it was a first year exam or right up until the end of medical school, it always felt like this exam is the most important thing in the world. But actually, at the end of medical school, it really doesn't matter what your individual percentage or mark was on each exam that you've sat. At the end of it, you're going to be a doctor, and the people who did less well than you are also going to be doctors, and the people that did better than you are also going to be doctors. I just wish that I had remembered this and remembered that the outcome is going to be the same. And even though it felt like not passing with good marks was going to be the end of the world, that actually there are bigger things going on in the world that are way more important than your exam, I wish I just remembered that it really isn't as much of a big deal as I thought it was. And overall, I just wish I had a bit more confidence in myself that I would be able to do well and would be able to pass exams without having to worry so much. If you also stress out for exams quite a bit, just try to put things into this perspective and remember that you don't need to be a perfectionist when it comes to your medical school exams, because there does come a point where it becomes incredibly unhealthy. It has a negative impact on your health, and it also sucks the joy out of other things that you should be enjoying as a university student. In return for what? A few percentage higher on your exams? It's just not worth it. Another regret that I have is not moving into halls of residence at my university. I decided to live at home for the first 2 years of medical school, and then in my third year I moved but into private accommodation, so I never had the experience of living in halls of residence. And I definitely feel like I missed out on the university experience because of it. Obviously, if you're not living at halls of residence and instead living at home, you're socializing with people less, you're making less friends, and you're just generally doing a lot less random crazy things that university students do. I often wonder what my life would look like now if I had moved into university halls. I've obviously made some great friends at university, but I feel like if I had moved into halls, I probably would have made multiple more friends. I would have met even more interesting people, and it's definitely something that I would change if I could go back and do it all over again. The next regret that I have is that I didn't join enough societies when I was at medical school. There's a lot of overlap in these regrets, and not joining that many societies was mainly because I would remain stressed all the time, and I'd always have this feeling of I could be spending my time studying. So I only joined a couple of societies, and for the ones that I did join, I rarely ever went to any of the events. As I mentioned with the halls of residence thing, if I had joined more societies and taken part in more events, I probably would have met so many more amazing people, had more fun in general, and just made so many more memories. So take it from me, try to join as many societies as possible. There are hundreds of societies for literally whatever interests you have, and most of you are only going to be a university student once, so try and experience it to its fullest so that you don't also have these regrets when you leave like I do. I really hope this video prevents you from doing some of the things that I did and encourages you to do some of the things that I didn't do, and just gives you some insight into what someone a few years ahead of you would have done differently if they were in your position again, to allow you to have the best experience possible. If you did find this video helpful, I'd really appreciate if you like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.